Hi everybody, my name is Ambika and you are here with me on YouTube's Unacademy channel, which is Let's Crack CBSE Science. Now guys, I want to make a request to all of you here is that please guys do download this particular app, and it's just not that because I'm asking you to do so, rather because you will going to have a very different experience over here, which is you will going to have daily live classes. Along with that, live tests and quizzes are all set for you. Along with that, there's a proper format of structured courses, like how you get your courses, like your syllabus or the test in your exams, exactly the very same way it is all lined up for you here as well. And once you will going to enroll yourself, you will going to have an unlimited access to all sort of other subjects as well. So with one subscription, you can go and check out all the other subjects. Now, herein you will be helped by nation's best top educators who are prolific in their own specific fields, right? And it is very easy, it is very simple to enroll yourself with Unacademy. And how you can do is simply by going to your Play Store, and you need to download this app, right? Now, the question arises how all of you will come to know that when this class is being lined up, what all is there for in your, for your schedule. So for that, you need to go to your Telegram app, and therein you need to enroll. You need to get, this particular link you need to join, wherein it is talking about Quest 11 CBSE Science, right? It is talking about Quest 11 CBSE Science, and herein all sort of information you will going to get here only, right? And for that, what you can do once you get a subscription, if you want in your subscription a 10% discount, for that you can use my code, which is AMBIKA, and it is in caps, right? Yes, Siddharth, I'm right here for whom you're looking for. And for that, you can use my code, which is AMBIKA in caps. Now, today's agenda is we will going to discuss in detail, line by line, the portrait of a lady. And this beautiful story is being written by Khushwant Singh. Hi, Siddharth. So, first of all, let's know our author. Khushwant Singh is one of the best known Indian writers of all times. So, I don't know if he is in need of any of our own descriptions, but then, yes, he is a very, very, very prolific writer who was born in 1915 in Hadali, that is now in Pakistan. So, I'm so sorry, Siddharth. I'm like few minutes late. Sorry. And that time it was in Pakistan, right? That time this particular district or town was in India, but now it is in Pakistan. He was educated at the Government College, Lahore, and at King's College, Cambridge University, and the Inner Temple in London. He practiced law at the Lahore High Court for several years before joining Indian Ministry of External Affairs in 1947. So he also was very active when it comes to politics. He began a distinguished career as a journalist with All India Radio in 1915, and therein also he worked as the in the radio show as well. Now, the portrait of a lady, this particular excerpt or this chapter is taken from the book of Unforgettable Woman, right? This particular excerpt is taken from the book of Unforgettable Women. Now, before diving deep into the chapter, I wanted to ask you, like, how is your relationship with your grandparents? I mean, that is something which we can't dare to put in words, right? That is something which is so difficult to express, isn't it? So that is what this whole chapter is all about, the relationship of our author with his grandmother. So, how do the grandparents generally deal with us? They shower unconditional love on all of us without a doubt, right? Siddharth, I didn't get your question. Please ask again. I'm so sorry. What is that? 2104? Can you please tell? Can you please elaborate? Yeah. And they talk about their own experiences and give life lessons of, when they give us their own experiences of life, they share it with us, and they tend to, make us somewhere, give us lessons like how morals basically about our own life, what all difficulties they face, they suffered through, and they don't want us to go through the same thing. So that is what, I mean, that is the unconditional love which anybody could ever shower on you other than your parents. And in fact, before your parents will be your grandparents. Now, in the story, Khushwant Singh has described his close relationship with his grandmother and the beautiful time they spent together. So, in this particular story, Khushwant Singh is basically talking about his own relationship with his grandmother. And, for a very short period of in his life, he has spent that time with his grandmother, wherein his parents weren't also there. So, he shared some kind of a bond with his grandmother, which is so different for him to even describe in words. Now, the basic theme in this chapter is, it talks about the theme of family bond and the theme of spirituality. These are the two themes in about, in which the whole chapter is being described here. Right now, another thing which we need to keep in mind is that the story is narrated in the first person. The whole story is being narrated in the first person, as in the author himself is being writing about his own first hand experience. Right? So that is being clearly mentioned here. Along with that, when readers read, no, it feels like that Khushwant Singh is sitting right next to you and he's narrating the whole story, his own childhood days with you. He's sharing his own childhood days with you. Is it? Okay, okay, Siddharth, thank you for telling it to me. I'll change it. It gives clear and vivid picture of the first-hand experience which the author had, right? So again, as I've already told you, it gives a first-hand experience to the reader, that whatever the author has felt, the in the very same fashion, the reader can also feel it, right? So that is all about Khushwant Singh. Now let's check out the story, The Portrait of a Lady. Yeah, here it goes. Now, before talking about it, I was just wondering, that in our Indian culture, I mean, our Indian culture is deeply, deeply, deeply rooted, in the bond of family, isn't it? Like for us, for we Indians, family does matter a lot to each one of us. And herein, parents do share a kind of a bond, a very strong connection with their children. And in the very same fashion, the children also have same bond, same connection with their parents. I mean, gone are those days when you were like dead scared of your father. Gone are those days, like, isn't it? We share a very different bond with our parents now. And on top of it, if you have grandparents, so that is something which is like icing on the cake. You are, I mean, it happens with like majority of the people that they are so connected, they're so attached with their grandparents. But no matter how what kind of a love you people have for each other, but there's always a tussle, a war, a trickle between, a conflict between our generation and, with what we think, how we think, that is so different with what our parents and in fact their own parents used to say think, right? So that is what, there is a great conflict between these two generations. In fact, when it comes to us and our parents, there is a huge generation gap. And imagine when you're expecting कि आपके grandparents भी आपको उसी point पे उसी level से समझ सकते हैं, so that is a, you're asking way too much. Why? Because they are from a different generation, and wherein what you are asking for maybe is not acceptable with them, right? So, and in today's scenario, this young generation is basically We all are gradually moving towards Western culture, but the older generation, that is our parents, and in fact their own parents, they want to stick to their own Indian values and culture. Like, don't you agree with me? This is what actually happening. So that is what it is being shown here in this particular chapter also. Now, let's check it out in detail. And we will going to read line by line to get a clear and a quick understanding of this whole chapter. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. So, like, how all the grandmothers are. So, he is simply telling us that my grandmother, like everybody else's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. And she had got the wrinkles, and since the time I know her. So Khushwant Singh is presently talking about the past 20 years. Since the time he had seen his grandmother, she looks exactly the same. She's got the same set of wrinkles which she got 10, 20 years back, and she still have those wrinkles, right there on her face. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. So, because Khushwant Singh had seen his grandmother always an old woman. So, for example, if anybody tells him that your grandmother was so pretty, she was once having a husband, and it is so difficult for Khushwant Singh to believe that. Again, because since past 20 years he had seen his grandmother in the same way only. My grandfather's portrait, so portrait simply means painting, right? Portrait, that is the name of the chapter also, right? So portrait means painting, right? Yeah. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room, right? So piece is basically like a fireplace above which there was a portrait of his grandfather. He wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes, and in that portrait what was expensive things, high expensive things. How are you? So in this particular portrait, his grandfather was wearing a big turban. Along with that, he was wearing very loose clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. And the way he was looking in that portrait, it looked like that he is somebody who is 100 years old. He did not look the sort of a person who would have a wife or children. And by checking him out on in the portrait, who was looking so old, who was wearing, such a loose clothes, it was so difficult for anybody to expect that he was once having a wife and, in fact, a children. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. So his white beard has right there till his chest, and he looked like somebody who is 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children, because he was looking way too old. It was difficult to even expect that he could ever have a wife, or in fact that too, forget about wife. I mean, forget about children. In fact, having wife would be something which nobody could expect from him by looking at simply the portrait. Because in that portrait, he was looking old. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. He was looking way too old in that picture that, he looked like somebody who could directly have grandchildren, but no wife and no children of his own, but rather many grandchildren. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. So herein the thought was almost revolting means it was, I'm writing the meaning of it here, it was difficult for anybody to believe that, difficult or hard to believe that the grandmother, that the grandmother was young one. It is so difficult for everybody to even think of it. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child, and like any other grandparents, she also shared with her own grandson how she used to have gala time when she herself was a child. That seemed quite absurd. Absurd means something which you can't even expect, illogical in certain way. So that somehow sounded pretty illogical to our author and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. And it was so difficult to even expect something of such kind, when she used to tell the grandson that when I was a child, I used to play games, and it was such an absurd, was such an illogical way of presenting her this way. Along with that, it sounded pretty undignified, right? Because you can't expect a grandmother and who is looking exactly the same since past 20 years. You can't expect her to play games around. You can't expect her own childhood because you have seen her in the same way since years. And on top of it, when she used to tell everybody about her own past, like her own childhood, it looked like she's simply talking about any of those fables. Fables are basically short stories. So she's simply narrating a short story and of the prophets, which she used to do every now and then. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. So this is all about wherein the author is talking about her physical appearance. She was always been short and fat and slightly bent. Slightly bent here means that वो थोड़ा सा झुककर she used to walk. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. And there in her face, she's got so many wrinkles and that they were like crisscrossing on her face. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. So the author is like so adamant. He's like, no, simply can't and don't understand it. Why is she telling us this lie? She cannot be somebody who was once a child. She cannot be somebody who used to play around in the streets. She was always this old woman who had wrinkles on her face throughout the time. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older. वो इतनी ज्यादा ओल्ड थी, इतनी इतनी ज्यादा ओल्ड थी कि वो इससे ज्यादा और ओल्ड नहीं हो सकती थी. She was like at her peak of this is like impossible कि इससे ज्यादा कोई बूढ़ा हो सकता है. That is what the author is trying to say. And had stayed at the same age for 20 years. And she had like उन्होंने थोड़ा सा भी change नहीं आया था. The way she was looking 20 years back, that is how she's looking presently now. There's no more addition of a wrinkle on her face since past 20 years. And the way she was 20 years back, she's still the same right now at this present moment. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. So, how clearly he's creating or he's simply showing us the difference between beautiful and pretty. So, he's saying that no, she wasn't pretty at all, but rather she was beautiful. Beautiful in a way that is, more like it's not about her physical presence itself, but she was a beautiful soul from inside. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. So, hobble means, I'll write it here for you, walk in and walk in an awkward way, basically because of pain, right? So that is why she used to hobble in the house, and she always used to wear this white spotless sari with one hand resting on her waist, and she always used to use her one hand, which was always there on her waist, to balance her stoop. Stoop means jhukkar chalna. So as it is being cleared that this grandmother was really old and she was having a bent back, so she used to stoop, and just because of that, her one hand used to rest on her back always. and the other telling the beads of a rosary. So that is simply जो rosary beads होती हैं, right? They are simply used to talk. I mean, whatever. जैसे कि संस्कृत में हमारे पास श्लोक होते हैं, मंत्र होते हैं. So people sit with those rosary beads. Why? Because it just tells us that one round is being completed. For example, you are supposed to chant a month for like let's just say for 12 times. So you do it, the one rosary 12 times mainly means like one round of that rosary bead. So that is what she used to do. So one hand used to be on her back and the other always used to be busy with that beads of her rosary. Her silver locks was scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face. Pale is something which is faded, and puckered means wrinkled. Wrinkled. Now it shows that her face, her silver locks, locks means hair, right? Another thing I have told you multiple times as well, the plural for hair, the plural for hair is hair itself. Nobody is allowed to call this as hairs, right? That is incorrect to say. The plural for hair is hair itself. It is not going to be called as hairs, right? And her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer, and she used to whisper her own prayers all the time. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. So if you have checked out any of those mountains, especially during the time of winters, they are all being covered in white snow, right? They all are being covered in white snow, and along with that it is like a spotless place to look at, right? It is such a serene means serene simply means pure, right? Like which gives you a sense of purity, that is serenity. So she was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity. So pure white serenity means simple calm character, a very peaceful character. It is being talking that ways, right? Breathing peace and contentment. So she was somebody who used to wear white clothes, and she was somebody who used to wear white clothes, right? And along with that, she was, she had this aura around her which simply talks about her purity, her serenity. My grandmother and I were good friends, and this boy, he and his grandmother were really good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. So the parents of the author, he left him along with him with in the custody of his grandmother, and both the parents had moved to the city to make more money to get the fortune. She used to wake up in the morning and get me ready for school, and the author was being helped by his own grandmother, wherein she was simply making, she used to wake me up in the morning. So she used to help him out for the school and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. Hi, Zed Sheikh. So what she used to do, she used to make him ready for the school, get him ready for the school, and that time also, पूरे time पे उसकी जो grandmother थी, the author's grandmother, she used to, sing those morning prayers in a very monotonous. Why monotonous? Basically, monotonous का मतलब क्या होता है? Like unchanged. Same format में, same तरीके से ही she used to sing that prayer every day. Unchanged sing song while she bathe यहाँ पे use कब होता है? It's very easy to remember this. हम जब किसी और को when we are helping in taking shower, right? जब हम किसी और को help करते हैं, that time we use bathe, bathe, right? For example, when we go and take shower, that is simply called as bathing. Okay, but bathing is somebody in which you are helping others to take shower. For example, हम लोग की खुद के pets होते हैं like dogs, So हम उनको help करते हैं in bathing. Along with that, we the young kids, so we help them also. For that, we will going to use bathe, right? That is bathe. Otherwise, it will be called as bath. So herein, as we already know, the grandmother was helping him out in taking shower, in bathing, and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. Or जो grandmother थी, like every other grandmother who simply wanted him to remember that prayer, right? Who simply wanted him to remember that prayer. So she used to sing it every day. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. So the author made it very clear that yes, I agree, I used to listen to her, but I had no intention to simply learn them. I liked her voice, but then, sorry, I couldn't learn them. Then she would fetch my wooden slate. Fetch means take or gather, right? Fetch, fetch means take or gather. And she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk. A tiny earthen ink pot, earthen means mitti ka bana hua, a tiny earthen ink pot and a red pen. Tie them all in a bundle and handle it to me. So fetch means gather karna, leke aana kisi ke liye kuch. That is called as fetch, right? After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati, sorry, where were we? Yeah. Earthen ink pot and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle and handle it to me. So she used to pack everything for her author and then she used to give it to him so that he could be ready to go to school. After a breakfast of a thick, stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. So with that, after taking a breakfast, what she used to do? She used to have stale chapati. Stale मतलब होती है पुरानी, like थोड़ी पुरानी. So stale chapati और उसके ऊपर वो थोड़ा सा she used to add a little bit of butter and sugar and she used to spread it on it. We went to school. So both the grandmother and the author himself or the narrator himself used to go to school together. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs, and she used to carry all those stale chapatis just to feed those village dogs. So as we came to know, layer lagana, plaster means layering of a yellow chalk, right? जैसे plaster होता है, that gives us actually a very fine place to write on, right? So that is क्योंकि पहले के जमाने में there weren't so much of availability of books and copies, no, slates use किया करते थे रिया. So that is what it is being mentioned here. Okay, yeah. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. So she used to accompany him to go to school because simple objective or agenda was that it was attached to the school. There was the same boundary for both of it. While the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda. So there was a veranda and on both the sides, either side means on both the sides, there used to be children, both the side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayers in a chorus, wherein all the children used to sit together and they used to sing those alphabets जैसे पहले बचपन में नहीं होता था, like we used to sit together and that is what we are supposed to do. We used to yell out tables like two ones are two, two twos are four. Okay, that reminds me of one thing, guys. हम लोग बोलते ना two ones are two, two twos are four. That is actually incorrect. There is no such word called as za in English. Like one za stands for what? Two ones what? So that simply means what it exactly wants to say is that two ones are two. I'll write it for you. Two, one, one apostrophe one. Two ones are two, not the, okay? It says two twos are four, two threes are six. That is how you're supposed to learn those tables, right? जो कि हमें पता नहीं किसी fashion में सिखाया गया था, which is completely wrong. So that is what actually happening here. Therein, the grandmother used to accompany him to the school, wherein she herself used to go to the temple and he used to go to school. The priest taught us the alphabet, and the priest only He used to teach all of them the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus, and therein they used to sing for those prayers, right, in a chorus, in a sequence, right, in a sequence that is called as chorus. Yeah, my grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures, and at the very same time, the grandmother used to sit there and she used to read those scriptures in the temple. When we had both finished, when two of us, the grandmother and the child himself, that is Kushwant Singh himself, is being done, we would walk back together. So they both of them, scriptures means जो holy books होती हैं उन्हें scriptures बोलते हैं. Yeah, when we had both finished, we would walk back together, and then they used to walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. And जब ये लोग वापस जा रहे होते थे, so these village dogs used to meet them at the temple's door. They followed us to our house, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. So growling simply means like yelling, shouting. That is the simple meaning of the word growling. So ये dogs एक दूसरे के ऊपर yell, एक दूसरे के ऊपर shout कर रहे होते थे, and they used to fight with each other for the chapatis which the grandmother and the author himself used to throw at them. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city. Now, story थोड़ी सी आगे बढ़ती है. He is now talking about his parents. It says that when my parents were comfortably settled in the city, जब वो लोग finally comfortable हो गए in the city, they sent for us. They sent for us means they called for us. उन्होंने उनको city में बुला लिया. That was a turning point. Turning point means a time, wherein suddenly आपकी life में कुछ change हो जाता है. Like with one decision, how everything alters in your life. In the very same way, this was a turning point in their life, in the friendship of both the grandmother and the narrator himself, because when they were in village, life was so different. But now they both have moved to the city. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, although they were in the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. So that is what which was happening there in village, right? Village mein to the grandmother used to accompany our narrator. The narrator used to study in the school, or the narrator when he was done with his studies, so two of them used to walk back to the home again. They were together throughout the time, right? But herein this wasn't the case anymore. City may, obviously you can't expect anybody to accompany you to school, although we shared the same room. So herein, though they were in the same room still, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. Imagine here, I mean, it may be looking so different for us, but imagine for somebody, हम एक pattern में कुछ चीज करते होते हैं, and suddenly that is being changed, that is being taken away from us. So that gives us a little sadness in life, right? I used to go to an English school in a motor bus, and from now on, our author or our narrator has started going to school in a school bus. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. And now there were no dogs in the streets to whom the narrator or the grandmother could feed. Right? There were no dogs anymore. And up din mein, what she used to do, she used to feed sparrows. Sparrows are those tiny little birds, right? Feeding means khilana. Okay, feeding simply means to feed somebody, किसी को कुछ खाना खिलाना. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard. So courtyard is basically the open yard in the house, right? The open veranda, let's just call it as, in the courtyard of our city house. As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. और जैसे जैसे time निकल रहा था, जैसे जैसे years by years it was rolling off, and उन लोगों का एक दूसरे से मिलना और ज्यादा कम होता चला गया था. Like when they were in the village, they were living together, but now with time it has, although they were in the same room in the same house, but तो भी इन लोग में ज्यादा बात नहीं हो पा रही थी because narrator was busy in his own life now. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. So for a very little period of time, she simply helped him out in getting ready, getting dressed up for the school. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. So like, I don't know आप लोग ऐसा करते या थे या नहीं, but generally what is I mean is what I used to do. That is what many people would prefer to do when they were kids. That whatever used to happen in the school, right? They used to come back home with full energy, and they used to narrate the whole story to the parents, to the mother maybe. So that is what he used to do. When he used to come back to home, he used to tell to his grandmother what all he has been taught in the school. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning. So that is what, children, this is like really important, which we need to keep in mind, that what all he used to um, discuss with his grandmother. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning. So now he was being introduced to science and he was being introduced to English more. The law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. So that is what it is being, taught to him in the school. Western science, other English words, law of gravity, maybe Newton, maybe Archimedes, what was Archimedes' principle? If you know about it, please write it down in the comment box. And the world being round. So if you know that it was being discovered years and years later, like I know maybe in the 15th or 16th, yeah, 16th century, or in fact before that, that the earth was round. Otherwise, before that, people used to think that the earth is square. So if you will walk from one end to the other, you will fall down. But that is definitely not the truth, right? This made her unhappy. So when he used to come back home and he used to tell her that he has learned few other English words and he has came to know about Archimedes' principle, he learned science. So this simply made her unhappy. As I've already told you in the beginning of the session, that no matter how close we are with our grandparents, abhi bhi, in fact, just not about our grandparents, if we talk about our parents also, we have a different set of patterns, we have a different set of notions, like how we take things, how we perceive things, what is our perception about different things, maybe. But जैसा हम सोचते हैं, we can't expect the same to be the way we think, that cannot be the same way how our parents can think. So imagine this grandmother is from a different generation. For her, learning English simply means that you are losing grip of your own customs and traditions. आप अपने culture को भूल रहे हो, and that is what she used to think, right? That is why she never liked it. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons, and along with that, she was, because it is all about science now, it is all about English, and she couldn't help him with those studies anymore because she herself never read about it. She herself never, known about. She wasn't being very much familiar with these new study patterns. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. And when he told her that we are being introduced to science and all that, when he was telling her, she was so distressed. She was so distressed simply means that she didn't like it. She was in so much of tension. She was in so much of pain and trouble that how come in these English medium schools, they do not talk about God. They do not talk about scriptures, right? हमारे holy texts के बारे में, हमारे gods के बारे में तो यहाँ पे पढ़ाया ही नहीं जा रहा है. So what is the objective of going to an English school? Because as you already know, when Kushwant Singh was in the village, that that time he was being taught by the priest of the village. But herein the story has completely turned up. No priest and no conversation, no teaching, no dealings with gods and scriptures. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. And one fine day, on top of it, Khushwant Singh told this thing at home that we are being provided the lectures, the lessons on music. She was very disturbed. And when she came to know about it, that simply made her very disturbed. To her, music had lewd associations. Lewd means a very cheap or vulgar. Cheap or, I hope that's okay. Wait, let me just rewrite it. It is all, it is vulgar or cheap. So she used to think that music is something which is very cheap, which is for for bad people. It is a vulgar way which you should not understand. I mean, which you should not learn. So she simply hated this idea of teaching children music. It was the monopoly of harlots. So harlots are basically the prostitutes. Harlots are prostitutes who sell, who sings, just to make everybody pleased. So she simply thought that music is for the harlots, for the prostitutes. Monopoly matlab unhi ki zyada, like for example, if you monopoly मतलब ये होता है कि एक ही चीज है और उसका कोई competition नहीं है. Like they have a supreme power in it. For example, if you know about Indian railway system, let's just say, so यहाँ पे it has a monopoly. कोई और private Indian railway system तो नहीं है ना इंडिया में. In the very same way, let me think of any of the other brands. Okay, Vicks. Vicks, you understand? Vicks जो होती है when we have cough and colds maybe, so we use Vicks. So you won't agree with me. I mean, if you have any, do let me know. There is no alternative of Vicks till now, right? Abhi tak bhi there is a monopoly, so they have captured the market. There is no competition of them. So monopoly means unhi ka sabse zyada. Yes, they're right. So for that, unhi ke unka koi competition nahi hai, and they are the whole soul supreme power there. So it was a monopoly. It was a monopoly of harlots and beggars and not meant for gentle folk. So she used to think that music is for, for prostitutes or, okay. So music is for the prostitutes or in fact for, for the beggars to make money, not for the gentle folk. So why are they teaching music to students in school? She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. Although she didn't used to say anything to our narrator or to her parents, but because जब कोई कुछ नहीं बोलता है, so that is more annoying, right? So that is what being mentioned here. That she said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. So, because she didn't say anything, that clearly showed that she didn't like it at all, and it was a clear disapproval on her part. She rarely talked to me after that. और उस दिन के बाद से the bond was suddenly there was something wrong with the with when she came to know that that he is being introduced to science, to English. She was to a certain level she was fine with it, but the moment she came to know that he is being taught music, they suddenly stopped talking. Specifically, she stopped talking. They rarely talked. She rarely talked with our narrator further after that. When I went up to university, so now story goes. No Z. This is for class 11. When I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. So finally, when he moved to his university, he got a room of his own. Till now, he was living with his grandmother, but now finally he got a room of his own. The common link of friendship was snapped. So the common link of friendship was the room that they were sharing the room, right? Now it was taken away. My grandmother accepted her seclusion. Seclusion means loneliness, or that she was being left all alone because author has went away to university with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel. So now what she used to do, she used to invest all her time in spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. So from day in, day out, सुबह से लेके शाम तक, she simply used to spin the wheel, and that is all she used to do. And along with that, she used to recite prayers. वो पूजा करती थी without, I mean, this was a simple day-to-day routine, or this was a simple way of her living life after our author has moved to the university. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. Or सिर्फ दिन में, like in the afternoon only, she used to take a little bit of a rest, and therein at that time she used to feed the sparrows. Now we need to keep these this in, oops, sorry. Um, okay, this can't go back. Wait, there has to be some way. No. Okay, I'm so sorry. I need it weird to look at. Oh, that's okay. Yeah. What I was writing, yeah. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. और सिर्फ दिन में वो कुछ टाइम के लिए रेस्ट करती थी, और उसी वाले टाइम पे she used to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits. So क्या करती थी? She used to sit in the veranda, और वहीं पे she used to break, or she used to make bits, and she used to feed those sparrows with that bread. She sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits. Hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirping. So that is what used to happen. She used to make she used to give the bread crumbs to the sparrows, and hundreds of sparrows used to come at their place to get the bread. Okay, so that is being mentioned here. And इतना ज़्यादा it's a veritable bedlam of chirping. So it means इतना ज़्यादा शोर हो जाता था, like how when the birds collect, when the birds gather at a particular place, right? So there's a lots and lots of chirpings of the birds, so it looked like they were shouting. Bedlam of chirpings means that it was shouting very loud. Some came and perched on her legs, and some used to come and used to sit on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. So she was way too comfortable, letting all the sparrows be around her, and they were so comfortable with the grandmother that they some of them used to sit on her legs, on her shoulders, and in fact some on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. So she simply used to smile at them, but she never ever dared to shoo them. Shoo them means bhagana. She never ever did that. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. And this used to be the happiest half an hour of the whole day for her, when these sparrows used to come to be fed by our own author's grandmother. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. So obviously, she was living she was having a time with her grandson since so long, and this grandson was now moving to abroad, moving to a foreign country, to a foreign place, and herein she was being left all alone. I was sure my grandmother would be upset, and obviously, because he was leaving her behind, she was a little bit upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. So he simply made it clear that I will be out, I will be away in a foreign land for 5 long years. And in this particular age wherein she is right now, it is difficult to say that she will going to survive, for those, I mean, the upcoming 5 years. And at her age, on one could never tell, because she was that old. And you already know, जब हमने chapter start किया था, that how the author has described her, that she has got so many wrinkles on her face, and she looked so old since the time he had seen her. So जब से narrator ने उनको देखा था, when he himself was young, तब से लेके अब तक she was exactly the same old lady. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. And when she came to know that he was leaving, so she didn't show any sort of sentiment. She came to leave me at the railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. So, yes, indeed, she came and dropped him to the station, but she dared not show any sort of connection, any sort of emotion. Sentiments means आपके emotions show करना, right? That simply means sentiments. She came to leave me at the railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. But she did not show any sort of connection, bond, or emotion, or just because she never wanted to look like somebody who is being affected. वो इतना ज़्यादा vulnerable, वो इतना ज़्यादा या वो इतना ज़्यादा vulnerable नहीं sound करना चाहती थी. That is why she simply didn't show any sort of emotions there. Her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. And only thing she was doing constantly, continuously was that she was moving her lips. She was simply singing, or she was simply having in her mind the prayers. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of a rosary. और मैंने आपको rosary बताया था. तो जो माला होती है, तो उसके अंदर जो beads होते हैं, that is basically when you when you chant a simple आप कुछ भी chanting कर रहे हैं, so one round of rosary means कि आपने लेट से वो जितनी बड़ी माला होती है उसके ऊपर डिपेंड होता है. So आपने 12 times वो एक मंथ पढ़ा है या वो आपने 40 times पढ़ा है, so it depends on that rosary. So that is what she was busily doing at that time as well. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of a rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead, and finally, she showed some sort of affection and connection to our author. So she kissed his forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint. Moist is when somebody kisses you, right? So it gives a kind of a moist imprint, right? So he said that when I left, I cherished. Cherish means I happily, I enjoyed and happily accepted that moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. Because as he has already mentioned that 5 years are a very long time, isn't it? Maybe she won't be able, maybe she won't be able to survive those 5 long years. So he was considering this, he was taking this as the last physical touch between the grandmother and between he himself and the grandmother. मैम आप इस सब्जेक्ट का टेस्ट नहीं लोगे? दीपक, हम लोग ये टेस्ट स्पेशल क्लास में ही कंडक्ट करेंगे, राइट? But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was not met by her at the station. So finally, okay, and was met by her at the station. So finally, he came back. Those 5 years, 5 long years were now completed. And when he came back, he saw his grandmother was still alive and he came there to pick him up from the station. She did not look a day older और वो थोड़ी सी भी मतलब how she's being described since the beginning itself that she is exactly the same way when what she was like 5 years or 20 years back. She was exactly now also after 5 long years. She did not grow a bit older because हमें जैसे initially describe किया गया था that she can't be older because she has already attained that age ages back. She still had no time for words. And while she clasped me in her arms, so in fact, इस time पे भी when he came back, she had no time to speak with him. And while she claps means एकदम ऐसे ना like you're hugging somebody, so एकदम एकदम tightly किसी को पकड़ लेना, that is called as clasped me in her arms. I could hear her reciting her prayers. So when she hugged him also, that time also she was simply reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows. And when he finally came, hi Shatakshi, and when he finally came, that time also she was very, 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 very occupied, very busy with her sparrows, although her grandson was here after 5 long years. But still, she didn't show any other than the physical hug which she provided him, which she gave him. Other than that, and maybe she was very happy that day, but still, she had the most happiest time of her day with those sparrows again, whom she fed longer with frivolous rebukes. So, frivolous rebukes means she never scolded them, right? She was having no serious affection with me, but rather she didn't even rebuke me, scold, to scold somebody. In the evening, a change came over her. So finally, the evening approached, and one could see a change over her. She did not pray. So imagine a lady who was so religious, who was always, busy herself in praying. This time, this evening, she didn't pray at all. She collected the women of the neighborhood, and what did she do? So she basically collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and उन्होंने उसी के साथ में एक old drum लिया and started to sing. And this, she called all the women of the neighborhood and she started singing. For several hours, she thumbed the sagging skin of the dilapidated of drum. So dilapidated simply means that was like simply a not so perfect, like it was in a very, I'll write it here, in a very poor, and sagging means purana, ekdam purana, and worn out condition of the drum. And so it is all about this, that the drum was in a very poor condition, poor and worn out condition of the drum, and sang the homecoming of warriors. और उन्होंने वहां पे, उन सब ने वहां पे कौन सा सॉन्ग गाना स्टार्ट किया, which was talking about the homecoming of the warriors, right? Homecoming of the warriors means जब भी like how the warriors are like basically the yodhas, when they come back home. So उनके आने की खुशी में, उनके होम कमिंग पे जो सॉन्ग गाए जाते हैं, so that is what she was singing. We had to persuade her. Persuade means manana. We had to persuade her to stop, to avoid overstraining. Hi Ujjwal. And we had to persuade her, हमें उन्हें मनाना पड़ा that she need not to strain herself, right? उनको overstraining की बिल्कुल 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 she should not do that. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. So the author has turned now 24, 25 years old, and for the very first time he had seen his grandmother without investing her time in singing up the prayers. She did not pray the whole time. The next morning, she was taken ill. So now, because she was busily beating around the drum and she did not pray that time also, and everybody was worried about her well being. So finally, the next morning, she was taken ill. It was a mild fever, and the doctor told us that it would go. So, although the doctor told everybody that it's a very mild fever, you don't need to worry about it, and still, it will go with time. But then she, I don't know, ऐसा होता है या नहीं, because I have also read it somewhere or the other that when death approaches you, you know it very well. So that is what maybe happened with her. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near, and she told it very clearly to everybody that her end is very near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray. Omitted means stop. She had omitted to pray. That means she had stopped to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. So when she was maybe taking the last breath of her life, that time only she stopped praying, and along with that, She was not going to waste any more time talking to anybody. She just wanted to keep calm. She wanted to stay quiet for a very long time till the death approaches her. We protested, but she ignored our protests. So everybody's like, nothing is going to happen to you. Why are you reacting this way? Everybody was shouting, but then she ignored our protest. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. So finally, she was simply lying on the bed and she was having her rosary beads and she was chanting on it. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. इवन बिफोर वी कुड सस्पेक्ट सो हम लोग इससे पहले कुछ समझ पाते या हमें कुछ आइडिया हो पाता her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. So the rosary finally, इससे पहले हम लोग कुछ समझ पाते what all has happened to her. The rosary beads finally dropped, fell from her lifeless fingers. Lifeless, why? That clearly showed that she was no more. A peaceful pallor spread on her face. Pallor means lack of color or like simply pale, okay? Lack of color, or because she was a lifeless being now, so that is why it has become pale. So a peaceful pallor spread on her face. Why peaceful? Because when somebody dies, there's some sort of peacefulness in it. So that is what happened with her also. We lifted her off the bed and, as customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. So they lifted her from the bed, as it is a part of Indian tradition, it is a part of Indian custom, and they laid her on the ground. And they kept her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. And that shroud means, you know, कफन जिसे हम बोलते हैं, customary means customs, rituals. So shroud is basically जैसे white कपड़े में कहीं traditions में उनको cover किया जाता है. That is herein it is being used as white. Okay, sorry, red. So shroud means वो जो कपड़ा जो use किया जाता है to cover somebody while that person is no more. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. So they left her alone and they went out to make the funeral arrangements. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. So finally, they took her to so that she on a stretcher wherein she could be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room with veranda with a blaze of golden light. So ये शाम का time था. The sun was setting and the room was lit finally with the golden light of the sun. We stopped halfway in the courtyard. So all of them stopped in the halfway of the courtyard, all over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff wrapped in the red shroud. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. So wherein she was kept, जिस रूम में वो थी, जहाँ पे जिस फ्लोर पे वो रखी गई थी, वहां से लेके पूरे वरांडे में there were thousands of sparrows. Scattered means fell away. So her jagah pe there were so many sparrows. There was no chirping and none of them was chirping. They all were so quiet, they all were so silent, as if they knew that this old lady, that this grandmother is no more. She broke it into little, oh sorry. We felt sorry for the birds and my mother fed some bread for them. So, we all were feeling sorry for these birds and because they were so quiet. So what did the author's mother do? She went inside the kitchen and she bought those bread crumbs. She broke it into tiny little crumbs और वो उनको छोटे छोटे pieces में उन्होंने वहाँ पे उसको bread की crumbs को bread तोड़ के रखी, which was called as crumbs. The way my grandmother used to do, exactly the same way how the grandmother used to do, and threw it to them, and she threw it on for the birds to eat it out. The sparrows took no notice of the bread, and none of the sparrows were made any notice to that crumbs of bread. When we arrived my grandmother's corpse of, sorry, when we carried, तो जब ये लोग उनके corpse means dead body. So when they were taking away the grandmother's corpse or dead body, they flew away quietly. And they flew away. They moved from there quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. And in the very next morning, because none of the birds, they were simply moaning. I've used the word here, moaning. They were simply mourning the death of the grandmother. And they were gathered here, they've collected here just to be fed by the grandmother. And when the grandmother wasn't there, none of them eat any of it. And rather, the very next morning, the sweeper came and he put away, he just swept away all the breadcrumbs and he kept in the dustbin. So that was all about our chapter, The Portrait of a Lady. The question answers will going to be discussed in your special class. Right? If you have any doubts, you can ask me right now. Right? Other than this, we are done with the first chapter. Tomorrow we will going to discuss the poem of photograph. Right? That is the next like the first poem of your book. Right? So we'll discuss it that tomorrow again exactly at 3 p.m. on YouTube. Right? Another thing which I wanted to tell you is that you can use my code, which is Ambika, Ambika, to enroll yourself with Unacademy. Right? So you will going to get a 10% discount on your enrollment. With that, I'll take your leave and do take care of yourself, everybody. Bye.